Paul Giamatti sheds some light on his problematic Star Trek Starfleet Academy villain arc. Star Trek has always prided itself on exploring moral gray areas, complex characters, and the very human, or sometimes alien, struggles that shape both heroes and villains alike. Yet, even in a universe where anything is possible, not every story lands perfectly. One recent discussion around Star Trek Starfleet Academy has stirred quite a bit of conversation. Paul Giamatti's portrayal of the show's most controversial villain. Now, in a candid interview, Giamatti is shedding light on what made his arc problematic and why he believes it sparked so much debate among fans. For those not yet familiar, Starfleet Academy aimed to explore the next generation of Starfleet officers while threading a complex narrative involving power struggles, ethics, and personal ambition. Giamatti, a veteran actor celebrated for his uncanny ability to make morally ambiguous characters feel deeply human, was cast as Admiral Kale Draven, a high-ranking Starfleet officer whose ambition and ruthlessness initially masked his true motives. Draven's arc was meant to be a slow-burn revelation, a respected mentor figure whose actions gradually undermined Starfleet's ideals. By design, Giamatti's performance was layered, enigmatic, and intentionally uncomfortable, but the reception was far from unanimous. "I knew from the start that Draven was going to be polarizing," Giamatti admitted. "The role required you to like him, fear him, and question him all at the same time. But the problem wasn't the acting. It was the narrative context in which the character existed. And honestly, that's where the so-called problematic label comes in." Giamatti's words are a rare peek behind the scenes of Star Trek casting and storytelling. What makes a character problematic in Star Trek often goes beyond their actions on screen. It's about how the universe frames, or fails to frame, the ethical and cultural implications of those actions. In Draven's case, the show's writers attempted to explore corruption within Starfleet, a theme that resonates with the franchise's history of questioning authority. Yet, some viewers felt that the execution veered into caricature, inadvertently invoking stereotypes and leaving certain narrative threads morally unresolved. "I think the intention was to create tension and discomfort," Giamatti continued. "But there were moments where the writing didn't provide enough context. I remember one scene where Draven makes a decision that would have major consequences for the Academy's cadets. On paper, it was supposed to provoke reflection on ambition and responsibility. On screen, some people just saw it as him being a villain without any depth. That wasn't the goal, but I can see why it landed that way for certain viewers." Indeed, Star Trek fans are known for their attention to detail, ethical standards, and love for nuanced storytelling. When Giamatti's Draven first appeared, reactions ranged from a mesmerizing study of power and paranoia to a problematic misuse of narrative potential. Social media forums erupted with discussions about the ethics of Draven's decisions, the portrayal of mentorship gone wrong, and even the perceived gendered undertones in the depiction of his relationships with female cadets. Giamatti himself acknowledged the mixed responses with characteristic humility. "Fans have every right to dissect and critique," he said. "Star Trek has always been a dialogue, not a monologue. When you play a character like Draven, you're stepping into a very public conversation about morality, ethics, and leadership. Sometimes that conversation exposes problems with the story itself, not just the character." One of the most controversial elements of Draven's arc was a storyline involving the Academy's experimental leadership program. Draven, in his pursuit of creating a stronger Starfleet, orchestrates a series of ethically dubious exercises that push cadets to their limits, both mentally and physically. While intended as a narrative exploration of moral compromise, the scenes drew criticism for their depiction of coercion, power imbalance, and psychological manipulation. Critics argued that the show skirted the line between thought-provoking and disturbing, while some praised it for refusing to sugarcoat the realities of leadership under pressure. Giamatti's approach to these scenes was meticulous. Known for his transformative performances, he immersed himself fully in Draven's mindset. "I approached him as someone who genuinely believed he was doing the right thing," Giamatti explained. "He's convinced that the ends justify the means, that Starfleet can only be perfected through tough, sometimes morally ambiguous choices. Playing that mindset without making him a cartoon villain was a challenge, and I had to be careful not to tip into overacting." In the weeks following the episode's release, the conversation expanded beyond the character to broader themes within Star Trek itself. Many fans began asking whether the series had mishandled a vital lesson about mentorship and accountability. Was Draven a cautionary tale, or was the narrative unintentionally endorsing the very behavior it sought to critique? Giamatti reflected on the feedback with candor, acknowledging that even the best-intentioned storytelling can falter when executed imperfectly. Star Trek is aspirational, he said. It's supposed to make you think about the future you want to build and the values you want to uphold. Draven was a mirror, an uncomfortable one. He reflects what can happen when ambition and intellect aren't tempered by ethics. If the story didn't make that clear enough, that's a narrative issue, not a failing of the character or the actor playing him. Interestingly, Giamatti also touched on the challenges of fitting such a morally complex arc into a serialized format. Unlike feature films or miniseries, weekly episodes of Starfleet Academy had limited runtime to explore character depth, ethical nuance, and narrative payoff. Some viewers felt that Draven's arc was rushed or uneven, creating the impression of a problematic villain rather than a fully realized anti-hero. Giamatti's insight highlights the tension between actor, character, and story, a triad that can make or break a performance in the eyes of a